Hello there, people of the internet. So I've got some interesting stuff to go over, and I figure I'm just going to go through them one thing at a time. I ended up getting a shipment of some new things that came in, and we're going to go ahead and explore them. Today we're going to have a look at this right here. This is a Turkish Forestry Carbine, however it is you want to pronounce that. And it's an interesting little rifle. It's kind of a hybrid rifle, and we'll get into that here in a second. And it's got some interesting history that makes sense if you don't really think about it. So, after World War II, Turkey was pretty much standardized on 8mm Mauser. As a matter of fact, I got my Turkish rifle, or at least one of them, right here. This is a Turkish, I can't remember the model designation, but a Turkish Mauser. It's an 1893 action. This one was converted from 7.65 Argentine, I think, because on the receiver we got this little cutout because 8mm Mauser is a longer cartridge with a longer bullet, and they couldn't quite fit them inside of the receivers, so they cut out a little notch on the receiver in order to convert these to 8mm Mauser, and that is what Turkey standardized on. Well, the Berier Rifle, Berier, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, this is a French rifle, and these were chambered in 8mm Lebel. And the Turkish wanted to give essentially their forest rangers, I'm not sure what they were actually called, they wanted to give their forest rangers a different kind of ammunition to protect, I think it was a walnut forest. The Turkish were well known for their walnut wood during this particular time period, and they needed forest rangers to go out there and protect these forests. Now, like I said, I'm not sure if they're actually called forest rangers. That's just speculation on my part. But we're going to call them forest rangers. But they wanted to give these forest rangers a different kind of ammunition other than what Turkey standardized on, because they were having issues with people going out and essentially poaching wood. They were illegally logging and stealing wood from these walnut forests, and Turkey wanted that to stop. So they hire some forest rangers, give them guns, send them out there, make sure it stops. But they wanted to give these forest rangers a different caliber than what Turkey had standardized on, because in the event that one of these wood poachers ended up getting their hands on one of these 8mm Lebel rifles, then in Turkey, 8mm Lebel was in extraordinarily short supply, and the likelihood of a poacher being able to find ammunition for one of these rifles was way lower than if they managed to get their hands on an 8mm Mauser. So that's the concept, at least. The idea of we are going to have this special team doing a special job within our borders, and that kind of makes sense because I imagine that the people who are poaching wood within Turkey are probably going to be like an indigenous people, or not necessarily indigenous, that might not be the word that I'm looking for here, but they're going to be probably people that are residing within their same country, and so if those people manage to get guns, it would probably be best to have them get guns where ammo is not going to be all that available to them, and that is why they ended up giving their forest rangers these Berier carbines to go ahead and protect their walnut forest. Now, that being said, I tried scouring the internet and finding information or documentation or photographs of the Turkish forestry services actually using these rifles, and I was unable to find anything. So the most I was able to find on these rifles was anecdotal evidence of people talking about them after they had been surplused onto the surplus market and were no longer in use by Turkish services. So I'm not 100% certain if the information that I have on these rifles is correct, but I think it's a pretty gosh darn fair bet to say that that is most likely the case. That seems to be the consensus of what most people have agreed on with these rifles. So what these are well, they're 8mm Lebel chambered Berier rifles, and they started life as a long rifle within Turkish arsenals. I don't know if Turkey stole them or bought them or captured them in some sort of situation, but Turkey had enough of these Berier rifles to decide to themselves, hey, this is good to standardize on for this particular force. We have just enough arms and ammo to the point to where it won't become a problem if the enemy gets a hold of them. So I'm not sure how they got their hands on them. That's I was unable to divulge that in my time of research. But what they did with these particular rifles is they ended up cutting them down to carbine size, and they actually added the nose cap from a Mauser, which is really interesting. I'm not sure if these resemble the Car 88 or the Car 98 styles of Mauser, but way back in the day, whenever they were issuing, like, the people who were standardizing on Mauser long rifles, whenever they were issuing long rifles to their infantry, they would also issue cavalry and maybe not mechanized troops for this particular time period, but artillerymen and people who didn't necessarily need a nice long rifle with them. They would issue them carbines, and the nose caps on those carbines looked exactly like this. And it's a really interesting little nose cap that you don't really see all that often nowadays. So the Turkish ended up converting their Berier rifles to be kind of like a Mauser carbine hybrid. They kept them chambered in 8mm Lebel in order to avoid anybody capturing them and having usable ammunition with them. And besides that, I think that these right here are the 3-shot version of the Berier rifle. I think that the 5-shot has a little bit of a magazine that's sticking out the bottom. But these are 3-shot rifles, supposedly, of 8mm Lebel, and they load with an in-block clip. These are literally just Berier rifles that are cut down at the very end with a Mauser carbine nose cap added to them. I have no idea what the recoil on these are. As a matter of fact, this one is in shooting condition, and I do plan on taking it out. But besides that, I can see the markings on this. It says, I don't know, I think that's TCOR MAN, so TC Orman. It has an N on it, so that tells me that this right here uses the updated version of 8mm Lebel. The French ended up updating their 8mm Lebel for a more powerful cartridge. I can't quite remember what it is that they actually did to the cartridge, but they updated it for a more powerful version of 8mm Lebel for their machine guns, specifically the Hotchkin machine gun, or the Hotchkiss machine gun, if memory serves me correctly. Now, you can fire the old style of 8mm Lebel inside these rifles that are rated for that in rating, which is their marking for updated 8mm Lebel. But you can't fire, I don't even think that you can chamber the newer, more powerful 8mm Lebel in your older style of chamberings. I think that there's a little bit of a chambering change, is that the word I'm looking for? A little bit of a cartridge change and a little bit of changing to the chamberings, just to make sure that you didn't have any issues with soldiers loading the hotter 8mm Lebel ammunition inside of their older 8mm Lebel chambered rifles. And this one right here looks like it's got that new chambering, so I should be able to load any kind of 8mm Lebel inside this rifle, which is awesome. So the actual bore on this particular one is quite good. It's nice and shiny. And although I am not 100% certain on the bullet diameter for 8mm Lebel, I've had people tell me it is a .330, a .327, and .323. This is 8mm Mauser. Let's go ahead and just see if it passes that bullet test. We have ourselves a solid pass on that bullet test. I'm going to go ahead and slug the bore on this, figure out what the actual bullet diameter is, and use appropriate bullets, and we're going to go ahead and take this out to a range, probably on another video, because I don't have the time to be able to do that today. And we're going to see how bad this recoils. I do not have any loaded 8mm Lebel ammunition, so I'm going to have to load up some 8mm Lebel. I can't remember what the rifle twist rate is on these particular rifles, but I know that they used heavy bullets. So I think if I use 198 grain 8mm Mauser bullets, I'll get good enough accuracy to at least function test this rifle. Again, I'm going to slug it, make sure that I'm not going to overpressure the rifle or anything like that, but if the bullet's smaller by a few thousandths of an inch, that's not going to really make or break anything for what it is that I'm doing. I've also got an 8mm Lebel clip coming, which is awesome. And I think that this particular rifle is going to do me really, really well. So this is definitely a unique one to have in the collection. It's a Mauser Berier hybrid used by the Turkish, supposedly. I think it's a really interesting little piece of history that is really unusual for countries to do. Normally countries like to standardize on a cartridge and just use one thing for everything, but the Turkish went a completely different route. And I'm not sure how well that worked out for them. This particular one is marked 1948, and from what I can tell, most of them are marked 1948. I think that right there is just kind of the year or the time period where a lot of these rifles were made. The bolts on this particular one, the bolt is matching. I also hear that that is very common with these rifles as well. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I even have 8mm Lebel dies. I think that I do, kicking around somewhere. I got them whenever I got my other Berthier rifle from RTI, but that rifle's incomplete, so I haven't done anything with it. And I've had that for a while. So thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I will see you guys on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.